He was just 8 years old, sitting alone on the cold library steps with bruises he didn't explain and eyes that had already stopped hoping. Until a stranger saw him, stood up and said, "Not today." What happened next would change both of their lives forever. And it all began with a single moment of courage in the rain. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and like this video. Plus, let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's jump into the story. The house sat near the edge of town, where streetlights didn't bother shining and fences leaned like tired old men. Paint peeled from the wooden walls, and weeds had long claimed the front steps. But inside, it was even quieter than the outside. Not peaceful, just quiet, like the kind of silence that holds its breath, waiting for something to break. Milo was 8, small for his age, with hair that looked like it had never seen a comb, and eyes too big for someone who didn't smile much. He sat in the kitchen, crouched next to the sink, his fingers scrubbing at a rusted pot with the corner of his shirt. The sponge had disappeared weeks ago, and no one had bothered to replace it. The walls of the kitchen were a dull yellow, faded by time and stained with water lines. A single bulb buzzed above, casting light that made everything feel colder. The fridge made a soft hum. The floor creaked if you stood in the wrong spot. Outside the door, heavy boots dragged through gravel. A car door slammed. Milo froze. His hand stopped mid-scrub. He placed the pot down gently, not letting it clatter. His whole body tensed like a small animal hiding in the grass, pretending to be part of the dirt. The door banged open, rattling on its rusted hinges. Carl had arrived. The man stomped in, smelling of beer and stale cigarettes, with shoulders hunched and eyes that burned. His voice came sharp and loud, cutting through the still air. "Where's dinner?" he barked, stumbling into the kitchen. He looked at the pot on the counter, then at Milo. "You call this clean?" He kicked the pot off the counter. It hit the floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the tiny house. Milo didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just bent to pick up the pot again. "Stupid boy," Carl muttered, knocking over a chair as he made his way to the couch in the other room. "Your mother's not any better." From the hallway, a soft voice answered. "Please, Carl. He's just a child." Janet appeared, wearing an oversized sweater and holding a laundry basket. Her eyes were tired, her face pale. She had once been someone who smiled easily. That version of her felt like it had existed a lifetime ago. Carl stood. His hand moved too fast for Milo to stop it. A loud slap. Janet hit the floor, her basket spilling across the hallway. Socks, shirts, a single towel. Milo rushed forward, but Carl raised a finger. "You want to join her?" he growled. Milo stopped mid-step. His feet wouldn't move. His hands trembled, but he said nothing. Janet wiped a bit of blood from her lip and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Go to your room." He turned and walked slowly to the corner of the house, to a spot between a small bookcase and the wall, where he'd hidden a pillow and a blanket. It wasn't a room. It wasn't even a closet. Just a space where no one looked. The hours passed like heavy shadows. Carl snored from the couch, loud and deep. Janet hadn't come back out. Milo lay curled in his corner, wide awake. He watched the light from the hallway flicker. Every creak made him flinch. But then, he heard something else. A zipper. A soft thump. Footsteps that didn't want to be heard. He sat up. His mother stood near the front door, coat on, a small cloth bag in her hand. She turned to see Milo watching. For a moment, neither spoke. "I can't anymore," she whispered. "I've tried. For so long I've tried." Milo stood but didn't move closer. She walked toward him and knelt beside the bookcase. She pulled a scarf from her coat pocket, beige with the initials JM stitched in the corner, and placed it in his hand. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I should have taken you with me, but I don't know where I'm going, and I'm scared I'll make it worse." Milo didn't cry. He just nodded, as if he already knew she'd leave one day, as if he'd rehearsed this in his mind over and over. She kissed his forehead. Not quickly, not sadly, just soft and full of something too heavy to name. Then she stood, opened the door, and stepped out into the night. She didn't turn back. She didn't say goodbye. The door closed gently, like a secret. Milo sat down again in his little corner. He held the scarf close to his chest and breathed in the faint scent of soap and something sweet. Maybe lavender. Maybe his mother's perfume. Outside, the wind blew through the cracks in the windows. The house creaked again, but no one stirred. Carl snored. Janet was gone. And Milo? He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat there waiting for something, anything to change. But nothing did. Not that night. Not for a long time. The town library sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, nestled between a coffee shop and an old flower store that only opened 3 days a week. Its walls were lined with ivy and the wooden door made a soft creak whenever someone walked in. It was the kind of place people didn't rush through. It invited quiet, and sometimes healing. Elliot came here almost every day. He was in his early 60s, retired, with silver hair that curled behind his ears and kind eyes that always looked a little tired. He used to work as a librarian in the city. After his wife passed away and his daughter was lost in a sudden illness, Elliot sold the house and moved to this small town, where no one knew his name, and the silence didn't remind him of too much. His favorite spot was a bench just outside the library doors. From there he could see the park across the street, the bookstore down the road, and, on days with good weather, children laughing near the playground. But today, something felt different. Elliot sat on his usual bench, a paperback in one hand and a coffee in the other. The sun was gentle, the breeze soft. But across the library steps sat a boy, alone. The child looked about 8. He wore an oversized hoodie and had scuffed shoes that barely held together. His backpack looked like it had been stitched back together with thread, and his face had a fresh bruise along the cheek. He wasn't crying, he wasn't talking, he just sat there, elbows on knees, looking at the ground. Elliot watched him for a few minutes, unsure what to do. Should he say something? Would it scare the boy? After a while he simply stood, walked over and sat on the edge of the steps, not too close. "You like books?" Elliot asked softly, not expecting a reply. The boy didn't speak, just looked at his shoes. "That's all right," Elliot said, smiling gently. "Sometimes I don't either." Minutes passed in silence. Then the boy looked up just enough to glance at the library window. His lips parted, then closed. Elliot didn't push. He'd worked with children long enough to know some kids speak without words. The moment was broken by a sharp voice shouting from down the street, "Milo!" The boy flinched. A man came storming up the sidewalk, red-faced, shoulders wide, and steps angry. His eyes locked on the boy. "What are you doing here? I told you to come straight home." Elliot stood. His voice was calm but firm. "Excuse me, is there a reason you're yelling at him like that?" The man didn't seem to care. "Who the hell are you? Milo's a child. You don't need to grab him." But it was too late. The man grabbed Milo by the arm, yanking him up. The boy winced but didn't say a word. His eyes didn't plead, he didn't scream, he just folded into himself like he'd done this 1,000 times. "Let go of him," Elliot said. The man laughed dryly. "Mind your own business, old man." Elliot's heart pounded, not with fear, but with something else. Anger? Maybe. But deeper than that. Recognition. He'd seen bruises like that before. He'd once helped kids like this in the city, and more painfully, he'd once watched helplessly when someone hadn't spoken up in time. He stepped closer. "If you don't let go, I'll call the police." That made the man pause. He dropped Milo's arm and growled something under his breath. "You've got no idea who you're messing with." Then he walked away, muttering curses, leaving the boy behind. Milo stood still, like he wasn't sure what to do next. His hands hung at his sides, one of them still gripping the torn strap of his backpack. Elliot knelt down. "You all right?" The boy didn't answer. "Listen, I don't know what's happening at home, but if you want, you can sit with me just for a while. No questions. Milo nodded, barely, and followed him to the bench. They sat side by side watching the afternoon roll by like clouds in the sky. After a long silence, Milo spoke. Just 3 words. That's my dad. Elliot nodded slowly. I figured. Another pause. He doesn't like when I read. Elliot smiled softly. Well, I do. And I have books at home, if you ever want to see. That made Milo glance at him. Not quite a smile, but something less guarded than before. I live nearby, Elliot added gently. You can come just for tonight. If you're scared, we'll call someone. You don't have to decide right now. Milo looked down again, thought for a while, then nodded. As they walked together down the quiet street, the sun low in the sky, Elliot realized something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. And Milo? He didn't know if he could trust this old man, but the hand that had reached out didn't. Hurt him. And for now, that was enough. The bench by the library stood empty as the streetlights flickered on, but it had already seen something beautiful begin. Milo didn't say much that first night. Elliot made him a warm sandwich and poured a glass of milk, but the boy barely touched either. He sat at the edge of the couch, hands folded tightly in his lap, eyes darting around the small living room, like he was waiting for something to go wrong. Elliot didn't ask questions. He just let the TV play an old cartoon, turned on a soft lamp in the corner, and gave Milo space. He had set up the guest room earlier that day, more out of habit than hope. The sheets were fresh, a soft quilt folded at the end of the bed. No, the dresser sat a small wooden train that used to belong to his daughter. He wasn't sure if Milo would want it, but he left it there anyway. You can sleep here tonight, Elliot said gently, standing in the doorway. No one's going to bother you. Not here. Milo walked inside slowly, his hand brushing the wall like he was unsure if it was real. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, climbed into the bed fully clothed, and lay perfectly still, like someone pretending to sleep so they wouldn't be seen. Elliot left the door open. That night, he stayed awake longer than usual, listening for any sounds from the hallway, but all he heard was quiet. Not the kind that feels cold, the kind that feels safe. The next morning, Milo was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table when Elliot came downstairs. He had folded the blanket and left his shoes by the door. You don't have to clean up, Elliot said with a smile. This isn't a hotel. Milo looked at him confused. Aren't I supposed to? Nope. You're just supposed to be a kid here. The boy didn't answer, but something in his face shifted. A flicker of thought, maybe a question, like he wasn't sure what that meant anymore. Days passed slowly but gently. Elliot kept things simple. Toast and jam in the morning, a walk around the neighborhood after lunch. Sometimes they read books together in the afternoon, sometimes not. There were no rules except kindness. He noticed the small things, the way Milo always sat with his back against the wall, the way he flinched at loud noises, how he never asked for anything, not even a second slice of bread, like he believed needing something would cause trouble. So Elliot never asked what had happened. He let Milo lead. On the 4th day, Milo found the colored pencils. They were in an old drawer, half used, some broken but still bright. He pulled out a few and sat quietly at the kitchen table. Elliot peeked over his shoulder as he sipped his tea but said nothing. The first drawing was simple, a stick figure with messy hair standing beside a small house. The second showed a large, hand holding a smaller one. By the end of the week, Milo had filled a dozen pages with drawings. He never explained them. He didn't need to. The pictures said more than words could. One afternoon, as Elliot was drying dishes, a glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. The crash was loud, sharp, sudden. Milo dropped the pencil. He was holding and dove under the table, arms covering his head. His breathing grew fast. His eyes squeezed shut. Elliot froze. He didn't move closer. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he knelt down slowly on the other side of the table, far enough not to startle. You're not in trouble, he said softly. It was just an accident. You didn't do anything wrong. Milo peeked out, tears in his eyes. Not because of the glass, because someone had finally said the words he had needed to hear for so long. I'm sorry, he whispered. You have nothing to be sorry for, Elliot replied. And for the first time, Milo cried. Not loudly, not wildly. Just a soft, steady stream of tears that fell onto his knees as he sat curled up beneath the table. Elliot didn't tell him to stop. He didn't rush him. He just stayed close, like a steady shadow, until the crying turned into quiet breathing. Later that evening, as they sat on the couch watching the news, Milo leaned gently against Elliot's shoulder. No words, just trust. By the second week, something had changed. Milo started eating more. He began asking questions. He helped Elliot in the garden, planting small green beans in a row beside the tomatoes. He even laughed once when the watering can tipped over and soaked Elliot's shoes. He found an old chessboard in a cabinet and asked Elliot how to play. They weren't very good, but they laughed every time someone made a terrible move. Milo even drew a new picture. This one had a big sun in the corner and two people standing beside a dog, though they didn't have a dog. Yet. At bedtime, Milo folded the drawing and placed it beside his pillow. This is for dreams, he said softly. Elliot tucked him in and smiled. Then you'll have a good one tonight. And for the first time in a long while, Milo did. The rain came softly that morning. It tapped against the windows like gentle fingers, steady and calm. The kind of rain that didn't scare or storm but whispered instead. Milo stood by the window in Elliot's living room, arms crossed, watching it fall. It's the kind of rain that makes you remember things, he said quietly. Elliot, who was sitting at the dining table with his morning tea, looked up. Good memories or bad ones? Milo shrugged. Both. There was a pause. I used to sit under the porch when it rained, he said. I'd count how many drops hit the edge of the roof before Dad slammed the door. Elliot didn't reply right away. He knew when to speak and when to listen. And, my mom. Milo paused, his voice catching for just a moment. She used to tell me if I made a wish while it rained, the sky would carry it. Elliot smiled softly. Sounds like she had a kind heart. She did, Milo whispered. Then came the knock. It was slow but firm. 3 times. Elliot's heart sank. Something in the air shifted. He stood up, his legs feeling heavy, and walked to the front door. Through the small glass window, he saw a figure standing under a broken black umbrella. Carl. His clothes were cleaner this time. His hair combed, but there was still something off in the way he stood. Too stiff, too practiced. Milo had already backed away from the window. Elliot opened the door halfway. I'm here for my son, Carl said plainly. No, Elliot replied, not moving from the doorway. I've changed, Carl said, his voice growing louder. I'm working again. I've been sober for 3 weeks. I've got the papers to prove it. I'm still his father. Milo stood in the hallway, frozen. His eyes didn't blink and his small hand clenched the sleeve of his shirt. Elliot stepped outside, pulling the door gently shut behind him. You lost the right to call yourself that the day you made him feel like he didn't matter, Elliot said calmly. You hurt him, you scared him, you can't fix that with papers. Carl's jaw tightened. He's my blood. And that boy, Elliot said, pointing gently toward the house, has more courage in him than you'll ever know. You don't get to take that away again. Carl stared at him, the rain dripping off the edge of his umbrella. Then, after a long silence, he turned and walked away. Elliot watched him disappear into the gray mist. Not quickly, not dramatically, just like a shadow fading into the distance. That night, Milo didn't sleep much. He sat on the couch, curled under a blanket, holding one of his drawings. It was the one where 2 stick figures stood under an umbrella. One tall, one small, both smiling. Elliot walked over and sat beside him. Did he look different? Milo asked without looking up. A little, Elliot replied. Milo was quiet for a while, but he still felt the same. Elliot nodded. Sometimes people wear change like a coat, but the cold's still underneath. Milo blinked slowly. Are you going to send me back? No, Elliot said without hesitation. I told you before. You're safe here. Milo turned to him. His voice was small. Even if he comes again? Even then, Elliot said. I promise. Milo leaned into him. Not just leaning, resting. The kind of leaning that said, I trust you to hold this weight for a little while. 2 weeks later, the court date arrived. The room was large and quiet, with tall windows and long wooden benches. Milo wore a blue sweater and sat beside Elliot, holding his drawing folder close to his chest. Carl was there too, in a tie that didn't quite sit right and shoes that squeaked every time he moved. The judge, a kind woman with calm eyes, asked a few questions. She listened to Carl's story about change. She read the papers he brought, but then she turned to Milo. Do you want to speak? She asked gently. Milo opened his folder and pulled out one picture. It showed a small boy sitting beside a man in a rocking chair, both reading the same book. This is Mr. Elliot, he said. He reads with me even when I pick the same story over and over. He doesn't yell, he doesn't scare me. The courtroom was still. I don't want to go back, he added. Not because I hate my dad, but because I don't feel like his son, not in here. He placed a hand over his chest. The judge looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. Thank you, Milo. Later that day, as they left the courthouse, the sky opened up again. The rain returned, light, steady, and peaceful. Milo lifted his face toward the sky and closed his eyes. What did you wish for? Elliot asked, handing him a scarf. I didn't need to, Milo said. It already came true. Back home, he taped his courthouse drawing to the fridge right next to the one with the umbrella, and under it he wrote, This is what family looks like.